Are you talking tonight?
I am doing the announcements, yeah.
Oh, you're Mike.
The power thing, yeah. I can do that. And Henry's doing the class, yeah. Which is fine. Is it on? Yes. Okay. I'll take some.
We're leaving and I get like 4 days for decades. Where are your clamps going?
They are giving them away.
For free?
Yes. So, have to grab some. The people that are like, we're going live now, so I'm always getting thumbs up on these. Yeah, get started, so. All right, I think it's time to get started this evening. Chris is gone. He's teaching in it's Windsor, right? Okay. See, Gabe? Windsor. Okay. Now he knows. All right, so we have a few announcements, and I'll ask for any prayer requests that we might have. First thing is today's Wednesday, but we're having Sundays, so it's our first Sunday on Wednesday, so stick around after class for that. There won't be a teen class, so teens stay in here for this. There's a lot of events coming up over the next few days. The crafting group on June 8th. Game nights on June 6th, so that's tomorrow night. Crafting group on June 8th. We have a ladies event at 5 p.m. on June 9th on Sunday, and that's the 60s and 70s event. So those born 60s and 70s, make sure and bring a photo and dress as your favorite 60s or 70s character, I guess, or something like that. Dress for the era. I guess that's an era, 60s and 70s. I don't know, what love beads, bell-bottom pants. Disco. Ask Karen. She's our regular or our expert on that era. It's a fun era. It was. I was around for some of that. It's good stuff. Then right after, on the next day, VBS starts. That's the 10th through the 12th. Doors open at 9:15. Kids pre-K through 6th grade. So hopefully you have invitations to the kiddos, and we have a good turnout for that. But that's Monday through Wednesday, the 10th through the 12th. And last thing on the list here is our Father's Day is the 16th, and your Life Choice baby bottles are due back on that day. And that is all the things I see as far as stuff going on. Does anybody have any other? Oh, and there's duck eggs and peppers and tomatoes if you want to grab a couple of those on your way out after you have your Sunday. And pumpkins.
Pumpkins.
Did you hit her?
Yeah.
Pumpkin, the plants, the seedlings? Or pumpkins?
Troy.
They're little plants.
Seedlings, okay.
It's a veggie day.
It's Veggie Day, so if you've procrastinated planting, now's the time. People have taken care of that for you, so get these into your garden. And duck eggs are good. If you haven't had those are really good, so don't be afraid of duck eggs. Any prayer requests that we have?
Not a prayer request, but one last announcement. For those who want to, game nights is tomorrow. Board games here at the church. We'll also have snacks. Good time if you want to show up.
Are you heading it up?
I heading it up?
To that tomorrow.
Yeah,
I
that's
think Chris
tomorrow.
is gone, right?
I still run it when he's not here.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there'll still
Awesome.
be game nights tomorrow.
Awesome.
So there's
Game
no
nights. Okay. Any other prayer requests? No? All right. Go ahead and we'll have our song and then our 90 seconds. And then prayer and then dismiss to class.
There's a peace I've come to know, though my heart and flesh may fail. There's an anchor for my soul. I can say it is well. Jesus has overcome, and the grave is overwhelmed. The victory is won. He is risen from the dead, and I will rise when he calls my name. No more sorrow, no
Okay. A lot of times I think maybe we prefer to live by law. Law, I mean, it can be easy. You have a clear set, of things. Makes life a lot easier, perhaps. Then I look at all that's going on and all the craziness in the world, and I don't know. We wouldn't follow that either, but looking back at right after or during the time of Jesus, the world wasn't much different, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of the sin and the craziness that goes on. We think, this right around now things are pretty crazy, but looking back, it was probably just as crazy or just as incredibly bad. And so thankful that we have Jesus. But we weren't called to be, under a law. Through Christ, we're called to a freedom. And I wanted to read Galatians 5, 13 through 24, just to kind of highlight that and what's expected of us. Starting in verse 13 of Galatians 5, "For you were called to freedom, brethren, only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in the statement, 'You shall love your neighbor as yourself.' But if you bite and devour one another, take care lest you be consumed by one another. But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desires against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, of which I forewarn you, just as I have forewarned you, that those who practice such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. Let us not become boastful, challenging one another, envying one another." So there's a nice list there of the deeds of the flesh, and we're aware of those things. But we're not to be living by the flesh. That's where the law sits, and that's where the law warns us against those things. But we're to live by the Spirit and give forth the fruit of the Spirit. So as we go forth, let's just make sure we're concentrating. And one thing is just concentrate on this list and just try to see if what we're doing fulfills the freedom that we have in Jesus. Let's go ahead and we'll have a prayer now.
Dear God, we're so thankful for this time we have together, and we pray that our hearts and our minds are open and we'll study your word. Father, we're so thankful for our visitors who are here tonight. We pray that you touch their hearts and keep them safe on their way back home. Dear Lord, we thank you for your Son, and ask you to forgive us from our sins. Wrap your arms around us and keep us safe. In Jesus' name, amen.
Easton's here. It's a bunch of them going out there. playground? Oh. You have to use this Sunday, don't you? You'll be up front? Oh. Does it work good? That works. What are you going to do yours about? All right. Welcome to the first ice cream night. So, yeah, ice cream. So, if this lesson starts to get make you sleepy, look over at the ice cream and think, oh, it's almost time for ice cream. That'll keep you awake, keep you thinking, it's not such a bad lesson. We get ice cream afterwards. So you get a reward. So the lessons this summer that Chris came up with are, we get to pick from Proverbs, and there were some topics that he listed, and so I picked pride. Yeah, pride. So there's a saying that says, pride leads to division, or where there's pride, there's divide. So there's some proverbs that talk about pride. I'll just read a couple of those first. Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 11:2, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. Proverbs 29:23, one's pride will bring him low, but he who is lowly in spirit will obtain honor. And in the New Testament, in James 4:6, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So what does pride mean? Anybody can just jump right in if you want to say something, that's fine. I mean, I can tell you the definition that I looked up. It says an overly high sense of one's own value, right? Conceit, arrogance. That was one of the definitions in Google. Rod?
I think putting yourself above others.
Okay. So what's the opposite of pride? Humility, right? So humility is a godly virtue that involves recognizing our sinfulness and dependence on God. Now that's a biblical way of looking at it. There's other kinds of humility, obviously, but that's, for us Christians, kind of what we look at. Philippians 2:3-4 says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count on others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Humility is the exact opposite of pride. So I've got 10 ways that you might be able to tell if pride is in your life. But before I give you those, is there anybody want to venture out and say is there a pride that's okay? Is all pride bad? Anybody want to go out on a limb on that one? Okay. That's one. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Pride is ultimately tied to an inflated sense of self and where you place your own value or your own worth. And a godly pride, if something could exist, is pride in God. It's pride in, look who my Father is. Look at Jesus and look what they've done. And the self, a godly humility is not self-hatred, but it is love because of who the Father is.
Good. So let's go to Luke 18. There's a good example to start with, right? Before I give you the 10 ways. In Luke 18, Jesus tells a parable. And he's telling a parable about a Pharisee who thinks he's better than a tax collector. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One's a Pharisee and the other's a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed, "Thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes." He tithes all he gets. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, Jesus said, "I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted." Pride can be seen in the Pharisee because he thinks he's better than the tax collector because of his good works. However, we see the tax collector crying out for God's mercy because of his sin. Wise men boast in the Lord and not in the good things that they do. Bill.
Chapter 12.
Yeah.
Do you have this verse down?
Go ahead.
Now I lost it.
It's okay.
No, there it is. I wasn't going that far. Verse 3. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think more highly of yourself than you ought to think.
Thank you.
So the ought to think shows me we should have self-esteem. We should have self-worth. And growing up, it got pounded into us, you shouldn't have any pride at all, and that's not true. We need to have self-worth, because when we don't have self-worth, then that's when suicide happens. That's when we don't produce anything in our lives at all, even godly things in our lives.
So you don't want to have low self-esteem or too high.
Right.
Can be bad. Go ahead, Rod.
I was going to say that you can have pride, pride in doing a good job, or pride in good work. But where it comes, the problem is that you're tearing somebody else down to make yourself feel better.
Well, what if we call that like you're satisfied? You have satisfaction. Same thing's true of the things that we have that God's blessed us with. If we take too much pride in those things, they become kind of something that we're worshiping instead of just something that we're satisfied that we could have. So fine line there. It's kind of like if you don't think enough of yourself or you think too much of yourself, you're obviously sinning. But it's a hard balance to have, because we do in this country have a lot of things. We're very blessed. It's hard not to be proud of the things we have, or our family members that excel. That's not necessarily a sin, I don't think, if you're proud of someone that achieves something, unless it becomes a replacement for praising God, I guess is the way to say it. So, do you remember when the apostles in Luke 9 had an argument amongst themselves, and as to which one of them was the greatest? And Jesus, knowing the reason in their hearts, because Jesus knows our hearts, took a child and put him by his side and said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you all is the one who's great." So I don't know if they even understood what he was telling them right at that time, but I'm sure that just really blew their mind, because it's like people often have pride and don't even know how it's hiding in their hearts. They just wanted to be great in heaven. They weren't trying to, but they got into an argument about it. So I think there's a fine line to where you start sinning. So when the disciples are fighting over who will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus shows them that those who are greatest have nothing to do with the position, but has to do with those who are willing to serve. So, any comments on any of those? All right. So why don't we'll talk about a little bit about why was Satan kicked out of heaven? So that's in Isaiah 14. Was he just bad one day and God said, get out? Go ahead, Jacob.
Because he wanted to take the place of God. He had everything in his footsteps. He was top of the world.
Yeah.
And he wanted more. He wanted to be God.
So what was the sin?
Pride.
That's right, it was pride that got, so that was
First things that happened, and what was one of the biggest examples of humility you can think of that might come to your mind? If you think about Jesus, what did he do? Going to the cross was the ultimate humility, right? He put himself out there for us. So it's kind of the two extremes there that you can see. Just like when Phil was talking about, you have to have some esteem, can't have low self-esteem or too high. There's also a way to look at the spectrum that way too. So we have 10 things. The ways that you might be able to tell. This is not an all-inclusive list. I haven't had Rob check it for me or anything to make sure that it's accurate. So, number one way that you can tell that pride might be in your life. When you struggle to receive constructive criticism, if somebody brings it to your attention, might be one way. I know I've struggled with that before because I don't see it as constructive, I see it as criticism. And I get defensive, right? That's kind of a natural reaction. The shields go up. It's like, but usually there's some ring of truth in that if that person cares about you, especially. Okay, number two, if you're not able to admit when you're wrong, maybe you struggle to ask for forgiveness after you're wrong as well. Don't want to admit it. So that's a hard one for me too. Don't like to be wrong. I've learned over the years to be better about that, but I still don't think I have that one mastered either. Number three, you see yourself as being above doing certain tasks, maybe. Mopping the floor, cleaning toilets could be because maybe you have a position or you have a high education. You don't think those things are, they're like beneath you. That could be a sign. I just generally don't like mopping the floor anyway, but especially don't like cleaning toilets. Number four, assuming you know when someone is trying to teach you something new, and assuming you already know it, and being a learner requires humility, right? And I've had trouble with that one. I think I'm scoring 100% so far. I am a good example of all the, yeah. Thanks, Phil. I'll take that as constructive criticism. Oh, thank you. That felt good. Number five, feeling like you have to be the one who has to teach everyone something. Maybe you want people to look up to you. right? If you ever known anybody like that, right? I don't seem to have as much trouble with that one. Number 6. You think you are better than someone less fortunate than you. Maybe they're less educated, they don't have money, you know. Be a lot of reasons. I don't know, those people that you see on the side of the road, you'll drive by them and they're asking for money and you think, well, get a job, you know. And that's usually what I think right off. So I know that's a sin. I shouldn't be saying that to them. But in other days, I'm like, I'm going to give that person some money. Somebody came up to me when we were in the airport last week in Newark. And we were all standing there waiting for Shane to come pick us up. And we were there for quite a while. And this guy came up and he asked for some money. And I gave him $5, said, have a party. But, you know, I just trying to look down at people like that, because I have no way of knowing if that guy's really down and out or if he's just making a lot of money, you know, by not working, because some people do. You have no way to know. So that one's a hard one for me, because I probably do tend to look down on people sometimes. 5 out of 6 isn't bad. Number 7. When you consistently flaunt things in front of other people. I know I've done this. Like, check out my body. What's so... or, look at that golf shot. Come on, Eric, look at that. You know, and he's like, whatever. You know, come on. Bob's like, no, that was a good shot. Yeah. The 7-iron, that magic 7-iron, right? So we told, it's okay when somebody tells you that you did good. It's when I want them, you know, I'm like, did you see that shot? Maybe that's a little walk on the line there, but, or you could be like, hey, look at my new stuff, you know, whatever it is. It's hard not to kind of want to brag a little bit about stuff. And we tend to do that. So that's another way you might see some pride in your life. Number 8, you are consistently critical of other people. Oh, that's a bad one. Yeah, I definitely do this. I catch myself all the time doing it, saying, stop it, don't do it. People will get me doing it at work sometimes, and before I know it, I'm doing it too. And I try to stop. It is. Mark, you know this all about me, right? I'm like this. So if you're consistently critical of other people, it means you may have a blind spot in our own eyes, right? It's like maybe we need to be looking at ourselves and not criticizing others. So that's one I got to work on. Quit criticizing Phil all the time. So number 9. Justifying your sin to God instead of confessing your sin. Yeah, I know I've done that before. Definitely. So if we're not humbling ourselves before God, we're trying to rationalize what we did or why we did it. Instead of just confessing it to God, we need to remember just to confess our sins. To own them, right? Not try to say, oh, I did that because, or whatever. And feel free to jump in anytime and tell me one of yours. But number 10, unwilling to submit to authority. Or saying, I don't need anyone to help me. You know, I'm fine by myself. I can do it. I know I've done that before. I think I'm 90% so far. I'm going to get an A. Rod. Yeah. If it's constructive, I think that's definitely Phil was helping me. Yeah.
Matt Calder.
Yeah.
You know, so, I don't know, I have trouble with a lot of times seeing my own flaws and stuff like that, and sometimes I do somebody rebuke me, and the time probably is Now, you said you don't take criticism very well, but I think it's helpful you kind of do a kind of insight on yourself and look back on it like, yeah, that person's probably right.
My parents said I was sensitive. I think I was just defensive. You know, my mom still says, oh, you know, he's sensitive.
She
She's
still says
93.
that.
She still says he's sensitive. Well, no, I'm defensive. I don't want you talking about me like that or whatever. I just want you to tell me what a good shot I hit, or not nice shoes I'm wearing, or whatever. But I used to have a shirt that said "Be nice to me" on it, and I'd wear that when I went to the dentist. And he'd look down and laugh, and the lady would laugh, and they'd say, "Oh," I'd say, "Hey, I've had some bad experiences at the dentist, so just be nice to me, all right?" So, there is an 11th one. If nobody else has one, I will throw it in there. Jerry. Right. So, yeah. So it's okay for Bob to tell me good shot, that's what you're saying. Or for me to say, Bob, what a good shot that was, right?
There's two more words in the Bible that come up quite a bit: admonish and rebuke.
Okay.
And so, when you say we shouldn't criticize, and when you admonish someone and rebuke someone, you're criticizing something they did or didn't do, and that. But if you do it in the wrong manner, then you really are prideful, and you're wrong. You're wrong trying to correct someone who's wrong also. So either way, whether you're boasting about something really good or trying to correct a problem, you have to do it in a spiritual manner.
So Paul, you mentioned Paul, and he got to see the levels of heaven. He got to see more things than any other human being got to see. Jesus, I mean, he got to see what the future was going to be for him. And so to prevent him from boasting, what they had to do to him, they had to put a thorn in his flesh, is what they called it. But we don't know exactly what it was, but to keep him from being prideful. He already knew where he was going to go. Yeah. So you mentioned boasting. That's in the New Testament. In the Greek, it's pride is related to any boasting or bragging or to inflate yourself. In the Old Testament, it was more the Hebrew, to mount up or to rise, to swell up, to appear above, to ascend, haughtiness, to aspire to majesty. So arrogance, boasting, self-righteousness, those are haughtiness, those are the ways that we kind of improperly or overestimate our worth, isn't it? Sometimes. So Phil, you read Romans 12:3 already, right? Go ahead, Rob.
If we're talking about pride and humility, as nice people, we're supposed to compliment and build esteem in people. But if we do it too much, it's prideful, but it's the right thing to do. But if we critique people to teach them humility, then it's the wrong thing to do. So
Be caught in a circle.
yeah, it's almost like it's inverted for some twisted kind of way.
And only a therapist would know it. But that's true.
A good point.
Yeah.
In Proverbs chapter 6, it says there's six things the Lord hates, and there's a seventh one's an abomination. And one of those, depending on what translation you have, it could be a proud look, it's a haughty eyes in the one in the NIV. So that's one of the things that God hates. And so, anyway, to his comment, I think the way that the attitude that we have when we're giving critique changes the whole thing about us giving the critique. In other words, if we're critiquing someone because, well, we do it better than they do or whatever, then that's against us. Whether the person accepts it or not, that's their business. But if we are actually critiquing someone to help them, then that's a positive for us and should be a positive to the person receiving.
Right. Nobody's gonna argue with you or criticize you for that either.
So when we're giving a compliment or we're building someone up, if it is from a genuine place, they know that.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna, okay, I'm not gonna probably do that with someone who's sort of lording, prideful over me or whatever. I'm not gonna see that in them, so I'm not gonna give that to them. And if I have a criticism in them, maybe I know they could take it or not. It's gonna be from where I'm coming from. And if it's about someone's sin, you know, I can approach them in a loving, wonderful way. And if they don't accept it, then he tells us to take one or more with us. And then we've done our due diligence. So I know I'm behind in my therapy footsteps here than you are, but I don't necessarily agree that it's a cycle. It's not. In my opinion, it is not. We are only responsible for ourselves. We answer for what we do, and it all has to come from a place of love. Whether we're accepting it or giving it is all from a place of love. Take that.
I will go on top of that and add the word, the level of humility that people just have to have within themselves. Whether you're taking a compliment or taking criticism, I think God feels we need to have to kind of keep everything balanced. Absolutely. So I do agree with that.
Yeah.
And your level of therapy is tops, so we're good.
It's humbling to me to take compliments. I didn't have that kind of upbringing. So a lot of people, for someone to even give them a compliment, humbles them even more because you think, no, I'm not taking that. I'm not taking your compliment.
Some people are just taught to say thank you if you get a compliment.
She just said something that rings true with me. I have a hard time when somebody tells me I do a good job because I have a hard time accepting that because I was taught, you just do what you're doing to serve God and don't worry about, what comes back to you. And so compliment to me is, I don't know how to explain it, maybe it's tough.
You explained it. So, why is pride dangerous to us? Why can it be dangerous to us? Go ahead, Jacob. It's one thing. So, was Goliath prideful?
Yeah.
When David came up to him? I mean, what did he say to David? He was laughing at him. And what happened to Goliath as a result of his pride? Took one right in the forehead, knocked down. So
his head roll.
It can destroy you. Pride can destroy you if you're not aware that it's happening. So there's a good net.
Because he said, I can take this giant down. What's wrong with all of you? But
No,
he said God was on his side.
He said it's in the name of
Right.
the Lord.
So the whole difference was he gave the glory to God.
Okay, so there we go, right? That's kind of the key that we were waiting to hear. It's like, what key do I need to put in my pocket? You gotta give all the glory to God, right? About everything that you have and everything that you do and you are, instead of taking credit that you can be okay on your own without God. Like, oh, I don't need. Just like we do it with people, we do it with God. And we find ourselves doing that, forgetting to pray to God to ask Him to help you teach the class or teach us or do a sermon or whatever you have to do. When I got to West Point last week and we were driving from the airport back to West Point, Shane looked at me and Paul and said, "Hey, I need a favor from you guys." And we're like, "Uh-oh, what favor?" And he said, "I need a lesson in a sermon for Sunday." And we're like, "Oh." So I had been thinking ahead of time that I needed to bring something. I brought something, but it's not really what I wanted to use. So he had done that to me last time I went there, so I was kind of ready for something like that to happen. So I texted Mike right away. I said, "Give me one of your favorite outlines, because those are always so good." And he did send me one, and I used it. And Paul, you came up with your own lesson, didn't you? And we both made it through, but I know I prayed before I went in there, because I'm not a preacher or a teacher. Not what I do, and so I needed God. I couldn't do that on my own.
Up on us and get a hold of us before we realize it. It's not. I don't think it's something that we consciously decide, "Oh, I'm going to be proud about this."
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just something that the devil lets sneak up on us, and sometimes it takes someone to say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Before it jars us to the point, maybe I better back down a little bit on this idea.
How hard is it to say that to somebody? Most of us don't like confrontation. Some do, I guess, but not me. I'd prefer not to have to tell Mark when he's wrong. But, you know, he's just so darn nice I can do it, you know. He gives me a hug or whatever. Yeah. Kelly.
I don't know where this fits in, but I've been thinking it the whole time. I struggle to take criticism or instruction from somebody I don't respect.
Ah.
So
That's a good one.
I don't know. Is that good or bad? I mean, sometimes the person's your boss. Too bad. You have to. But it is really hard for me. If it's somebody that I don't respect their life, or I don't respect the way they conduct themselves, or whatever, I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah. I can see that.
You have to know they care.
Yeah, I think that's it. If, in the absence of a relationship, it's
Right.
really hard.
I was thinking the same thing along the same lines, and if we were all following the Bible and we were all humble in spirit, and God wanted us to, and then we could approach, because I hate approaching people if there's a conflict that could arise from it, and especially to rebuke someone, that would be tough. But if we have that relationship, like Eric and I can do that, but
You rebuke Garrett? She is.
Confession.
I'll play with my Bible.
Just say yes, dear. That's all.
I'd really like to hear more about that. Later. Jerry.
It's interesting to me that in the Gospels the word boast is not in any of the Gospels. But when Paul wrote to the Corinthians and also in the book of Romans, he indicated there that the problem that the Jews had with conversion was that they were boasting in the law itself, not in the person or the person of God who gave the law. They had elevated the tenets of the law above God's ability to control the law. So they basically said, as long as the law is standing, you're not going to convert me to Christianity. We're not going to do that.
John.
So Romans 7:8 says, "But sin, taking opportunity through the commandment, produced in me coveting of every kind. For apart from the law, sin is dead. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin became alive and I died." If you substitute coveting with pride, it just like pops up. I mean, you can't really sit there and say, well, don't do it, because like when somebody confronts you or you're in a situation, it just like almost instantaneous kind of grabs a hold of you, And so if you can do that with this and saying that, trying to understand that the only way that you can get rid of pride is through the cross, and, through the blood to cleanse us and do it. And I found plenty of sins in my life that I've been able to overcome just by the blood, just remembering that cleanses me.
It's almost ice cream time. So there was a number 11 on. Someone who talks about themselves all the time. I know I do that. I catch myself doing it. Yeah. Well, that was extra credit. One, in case you wanted an A, but you were at like 90%, you get the extra credit. But teachers know how that works, right, Bob? Extra credit points.
Is that when I am getting prideful about something and probably not noticing it, God does something to kind of take me down a peg. I just noticed that. I don't know if that's biblical either. I guess I need to study up on that, but I have noticed that he'll do a little something to you to be like, hey, you know what? You're not so hot and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, take it down a notch,
We have that in golf.
Well,
Yeah.
The verse that you here says pretty much exactly that. Pride
Yeah.
goeth before destruction. So humility is really a protection for ourselves. If we prop ourselves up with our pride, oftentimes there's a fall, and those falls can be devastating.
Well, it's probably a really good idea to pay attention to those little lessons, because if you don't pay attention to the little lessons that are taking you down a notch, you're going to be taken way down.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is important I absolutely think it's from God when I get taken down a notch. I think that's absolutely Him saying, do not forget who is in charge, and you are nothing without me, and but I think it's important to remember that.
I've always heard that you want to humble yourself and not have God humble you.
We have a song we sing, right? Phil, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Yeah. So you've heard the bigger they are, the harder they fall. That goes in line with what you're saying. In 1 Corinthians 10:12, therefore let no one who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. So it's pretty easy to do if you're good at something or you achieve a lot. I think those people have it even worse because they get full of themselves. And, so I feel more sorry for them. They had an even harder time with it than even me that got an A on the test. They might even have a harder time. So, and we got to remember pride of life, right? And we got to seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and not the things that we want necessarily. That's so hard. Because I grew up wanting a lot of things that I couldn't get them, but when I finally was able to get something, I went after those things, and I wanted them, and I'm like, oh, am I putting wanting that thing ahead of what I should be doing? That's a hard one to, yeah. Because in the end, we all end up the same, and God's in charge, right? So we have to submit ourselves to Him. The only thing I'll give you a little bit to take home if you want to look up, and there's these two kings in 2 Chronicles chapter 25 and 26. Uzziah and his son Amaziah and his son Uzziah. Those are really good stories about pride. They're interesting reading. We don't always get into 2 Chronicles and read a whole lot of stuff on a regular basis, but I like both of those stories. If you get a chance to read them, and so when you study for something like this, it really gets you into looking up a whole bunch of stuff. And those two prideful kings were destroyed over their own pride, and when you read it, you go, wow, how dumb. They were the king of Judah. and they just threw it all away for their pride. So you'll probably remember when you read those stories, you'll probably be like, oh yeah, I know these stories. It is 2nd Chronicles. Let me go there, make sure I got that right. 25. I think it's 25. So in 2nd Chronicles chapter 25, it starts talking about Amaziah being 25 years old and became king of Judah. And it's a really good story about what he does and how pride destroys him. And in chapter 26, his son takes over the kingdom and rules very well for a long time, and still, in the end, pride gets him too. I would think it'd be much harder as a king to have humility. Much, much harder. I mean, because you're in charge of everything, right? How would you, who would come and criticize you? It's off with his head, if you criticize the king. So I think that would be even harder, because nobody ever wants to tell him they have any clothes on or whatever. Any last comments? Mark, anything?
There's your chance, bro.
I think you did a great job.
All right, let's close with a prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, thanks so much for showing us your ability to teach us through your word, and for all of us to have a chance to share some of our thoughts together and learn more about how we should be applying your word to our daily lives. Just be with all of us. Help us to stay behind and enjoy each other's fellowship. Thank you so much for the wonderful ice cream. In Jesus' name, amen. Sorry, the ice cream's not there. Promised ice cream, there's no ice cream, huh? There will be ice cream. Thank you. Oh, good.